testimony. I call it Providence, and Providence is defined as God being involved in everything. Sometimes he just allows things to happen, and sometimes he causes things to happen. And his ways are not our ways. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in just a moment. Even though it says over in Philippians 4:8 to think on these things that are lovely, just, pure, of good report. These are things that are helpful and healthy for our minds, because we don't have any power other than the power of the Holy Spirit that's living in us to keep helping us, warning us, and trying to direct our path, and we're often, at least I am, disobedient. So in our daily walk, it's a lifelong endeavor to continue growing. My New Year's resolution is every year in the last 10 years is just to pick up where I left off. That's my New Year's resolution, because I want to keep on growing and keep on growing and keep on developing my relationship with Jesus. And 1 John 5:7, you understand where Jesus is. It says that there are three that bear record in heaven: the Father, the Word, that's Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. And these three are one. And sometimes you get an argument, oh, that wasn't in the original text, so forth. But it's in the word that we study from today. And if you believe that the word is God-breathed, as serious college, Bible students understand and scholars, then you have to accept that. And I believe that it was put in there just so for clarification, so that everybody could easily understand that Jesus is the middle person of the Godhead. And the Godhead, that word you'll find in Colossians 2:9. In him dwells the fullness of the Godhead, bodily, meaning human form. So providence, God is behind everything that goes on in the world today. He allows the Islamic people to continue to exist, the Hindus, the Jainists, who was those people that King Cyrus, Zoroastrians, they're still around. Those are the ones, that was the religion of King Cyrus when they took over Israel. And that's why that religion is liberal. Israel was still allowed to worship and keep it the Sabbath day and do their customary things. And they were also allowed eventually to go back and rebuild the temple set up by Ezra and Nehemiah. So that's how that was happened. Providence, God's working all this. But in my life, well, to me it was hard. Like I say, God's ways are not our ways. But to me it was hard being born in Alabama. And in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, the terrorist group for what was known, what we called then, were colored people. And if you were called black by a white person or another colored person, that was those were fighting words. You know, you get ready then. You don't call me black, because that was just derogatory for some reason. And our people had to go through, colored people had to go through a metamorphosis, sort of, to understand that black was beautiful. Like we marched around the courthouse over there in Oakland, black is beautiful, so forth. We were trying to find our identity. And eventually we did. We were calling ourselves Afro-Americans, which I still do because I'm not African. Afro-Americans are people that are descendants of Africans, but the descendants experienced the slavery and the lifestyle that we were bred like animals like cattle and sold the same way so that you had more hands to work in the field. So I was born under those kind of conditions, and the terrorists that my mother and many other black people in the South in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it's another exodus. People were getting away from the terrorist group, the KKK. They were escaping there. Some went north to New York. One of my aunties went to Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and one went to Ohio, Dayton area. And my mother came to California, and mothers want the best for their children, you know. And so my mother was getting away from the southern thing and brought us here for a better chance at life, you know, instead of the noose. And so my mother left Dad down there and never knew Dad. So when I hear people talking about their dad and this and that and the other, it saddens me sometimes because I never knew Dad. But as God would have it, he had somebody to step in. So when we were in Alabama, I was about 4 years old when my mother brought us to California. And there was 5 of us boys, and my mother was pregnant with my sister Doris on the train, on the train coming up here. And then we escaped the noose down there, only to be caught in another noose when my mother got to California. And the noose was called the welfare system. And that was my mother's only means of support. She only had a 4th grade education. Education was precious then, but you had to quit school and go work in the cotton fields. So that was another trap. And so that's when I found out what hunger was about and being poor. Because I was too little to remember anything from Alabama except the horror stories that my older brother and some others were telling me about. Oh, you know, the girl, the rats ate her lips off. She went to bed and she had crumbs on her mouth and they crawled up and she was scared, frozen scared, why she didn't move, you know. So we had these horror stories like that and about haints and ghosts and all that kind of stuff. You know, Southern people sometimes have a lot of wild stories like that, you know, suspicions and stuff like that. But it set in on us and we were scared of rats. But so the only places that my mother could find for us to live were, you know, older houses. In Oakland back then, they had a lot of Victorian houses. Most of the time she'd rent a Victorian house. Most of the time it was in the back, a house in the front and a house in the back. But my mother loved us very much, and that kind of love, the Greeks, you hear the Greeks again, influenced the Bible words and all that. But it's called sorbe, and it's also called familia. That's family love, and that family love is very powerful. My mother loved us, and we loved Mother, but we were so rotten and bad. Sometimes I'd be sitting around whining at my mother, Mama, I want some new shoes. Mama, I'm hungry. My mother was very soft-spoken, and she'd just say, don't worry me, boy. Don't bother me. And I'd keep it up. And the next thing I knew, I was on my back with my face stinging and little blue and red things floating around before my eyes. And then I shut up. But my mother loved us, and we loved Mother. So we would have, if I had my choice, it is God, you know, he would have it that we would be taken from Mother. But if I had my way, that never would happen. I would have continued putting up with those roaches and those rats. And these were strong, powerful rats. These were He-Man rats. These weren't little, And the poverty, the crime, the violence, and that's the way we grew up. A black community, well, the Negro community, that's what you had to deal with. Everything was solved by this. And that's the way I grew up. Until I got put in some place where I saw a different family lifestyle. And anybody ever had the tar beat out of them? Well, I used to be fat. From Alabama, I brought us out here. Well, I was fat when I got to California. On the farm, you didn't go hungry, because, and then I found out that I had heart trouble because my Aunt Smokey, my favorite auntie, she would tell Thomas, I'd go picking, peas or something with her when I got old enough. She said, Thomas, your heart. I'd be out there in the sun just working. I didn't know anything about a heart condition, She said, Thomas, you better watch it, your heart. So we were hungry a lot of times. The places that we lived in, were floorboards were sinking in, and sometimes a sheetrock. They call it particle board or something else now, but those days we call it sheetrock. A plaster board would be hanging down, and in wintertime the rain's coming through, and in the middle of the night you heard something go, blam! That would be the sheetrock falling off, And we were hungry, no doubt about it. My mother's social worker, she was an older white lady. Her name was Miss Fry, and she was very kind to my mother. And she would occasionally bring a gift to my mother. And in those days, there was no food stamps. Some people think food stamps were here forever and always, but they weren't. There were no food stamps until about 1963 or 4. And then later on, there was government butter that you could get free, and the churches used to distribute that and stuff like that, but we didn't have that when I was growing up as a young boy. So when the food ran out, the first would come, my mother would get the check, we'd go downtown to the supermarket and load 2 or 3 baskets of food, and my mother would take it home, and she kind of have to ration it out. We'd eat good for maybe a couple of days, some hog kidneys, southern stuff, hog kidneys smothered in gravy and stuff like that, Of course, a lot of that stuff we ate then, I wasn't arguing about it because I was hungry. But a lot of today, I don't eat slave food, what's called slave food. I don't eat chitlings. Of course, if I visited somebody's house and they offered it to me, I would have to accept it rather than offend them. I would eat a small amount of it, but I don't care for that kind of food. If I eat meat, I might still eat some chicken feet, but I'd prefer a steak or something like that, But my mother loved us, and that noose was a horrible noose because we had to put up with those things, and we'd go out stealing sometimes. Jack London Square wasn't far from where we lived. It wasn't built up like it is today with all the clubs and the theater and all of those things that are down there. They had maybe 3 of the restaurants at the harbor there, and the rest of that area was mostly warehouses and vacant lots. So we were just bad, and I was so glad that I was able to do something to make my mother happy before she died, I made it through junior college, and she was there and was able to go through the ceremony, and then some years later I was able to get my bachelor's degree from San Francisco State, and she was able to be there for that, and I was determined. It took me 11 years to get that BA because I was one of those that had to work, and I was trying to raise a family and go to school and all that at the same time. So sometimes, like my first foster father said, it ain't what you want, boy. It's what you got to work with to get what you want, And so eventually my mother got and yeah, we used to go stealing, and sometimes I'd go with them. And one time we got caught stealing bikes because a couple of my brothers are 9 months younger than me, one was, and one was about a year and a half older than me. So we're all stair-step, you know. And me and that one that was 9 months older than me, boy, we used to sibling rivalry was hard on us. You know, I was supposed to be tough, you know, tank, fat boy they call me, you know. And so being in a hunger situation, one day I came home and Jerome, that was my younger brother's name, I don't know where he got that weenie from, a hot dog and an egg, but he was boiling the weenie and the hot dog on the stove, and I'm being the older brother, I'm going to hog in on it, right? And we started rumbling up in the house, and I saw the pot handle about to come over, and he didn't, and I got out the way, and he got scalded. He got scalded here. I got a pretty good beating out of that, and I deserved it. And then there's another time when my oldest brother, John, I don't know where he got the potato from, but it was just a regular old white potato, you know, but he hid it, and but I saw where he hid it at. And so when he was gone, I went in the drawer there and got it and cut it in half. I wasn't going to take it all. I was just going to take half of it, and, you know, he came home, and he was so furious. Oh, man, he was about ready to kill me. I don't care what you better glue it back together. Ridiculous stuff. You better glue it back together if you have to. And I didn't know what, I was just so discombobulated. I don't know what to do. I knew I couldn't glue no potato back together. So he eventually got over it, you know. But we were just colored kids, you know, down in the colored neighborhood and living the poor life the best we could. One time I went stealing bikes with him and got caught trying to shake the police. I'd cut this way, he'd cut that way. I'd try to shake him by going back this way, he put it in reverse and cut back that way. I'd cut back this way. By the time I was fat, so I got tired. And I ran up on this cyclone fence trying to get over it. And that big white policeman almost pulled my pants off, pulling me off of that fence. So that time, my mother wanted to whoop us, and I ran. We always would run from mother when she wanted to discipline us. But one time I came home from school, and her boyfriend, the father of the next 5 children that came along in California, he was there, snatched me right there like that, put my head right down there between his legs. This was all hanging out, and my mother had all she wanted. And I was screaming, "Mama, I ain't gonna do it no more. I ain't gonna do it no more, Mama." "I know you ain't." And I didn't do it no more either. So eventually my mother got a new social worker, and she was up and coming. She talked disrespectful to my mother. Let's forward, next time I come here, I don't want to see any flies on the front porch. Well, when you were bad kids, like I say, my mother didn't want dogs in the house, but we'd snake the dog in the house, you know. And, you know, 3 of us in a bed, we'd get peed on by the younger ones, you know. You feel that warm sensation coming up on you. Scared to go to the bathroom because our bedroom is here, and my mother's bedroom is there, and the kitchen's there, and the bathroom's way over there. And you could look in the kitchen there and see those He-Man rats jumping up on the table and up on the stove. So I was reluctant to go to the bathroom, so I was bad. And I just apologized to my sister Doris. I said, because I would get her to go in there and get scared first. And then I said to myself, see, God was working with me even then. God said, that's not right. So he gave me another plan. I would keep a little couple of shoes or something by the bed, and I'd throw them in there to scare the rats away before I went to the bathroom. And so my mother would have to, yeah, we had chinchy bugs. We call them chinchy bugs. They're bed bugs, you know. But my mother would, you know, wash the mattress out and hang it outdoors there and all that, you know. But that's being poor. We had what we called alligator shoes. I don't mean alligator skin, these fancy high-class shoes, but alligator shoes were shoes that the sole had worn. You had a hole in the sole, and that had worn out. and the whole front end of the sole was worn out. So when you'd walk down, you try to keep your toes bent so they wouldn't flap, but you flap, flap, flap like that because the whole front end of the shoe would come up, like an alligator's mouth, But that's all part of being poor. And yeah, you're shamed. So we'd go back behind, there was a store, like a chain store, and it was located on MacArthur and Broadway, where there's a big newest Kaiser facility in Oakland right now. And we'd go in there and shoplift sometimes. I just didn't like the way it made me feel to steal. I didn't like that, and when two of my brothers, the one younger than me and the one next older than me, well, they started taking what they wanted. Transistor radios were new back then, and so they'd beat up kids and take their bikes and take the transistor radios and stuff like that. And I didn't like that, so I didn't go with them. So they went to foster homes before the rest of us, about a year and a half. So one day, in about June, sunny summer day, my mother had to go to court, and me and my sister Doris, I'm about 3.5, 4 years older than Doris. That's the one that was born in California, but my mother was pregnant with on the train out here. And we had to go to court, and my mother, Shirley, was about this old, and Sheila was in this arm here, about 6 months old, and went to court. And when the judge said, bailiff, Miss Ford, these children are a ward of the court, my mother had a nervous breakdown right there in the court with me looking at her. She screamed and yelled and fell on the floor, and I never saw my mother act like that. It hurt. It really did hurt me. And I was trying not to cry. I was trying to be a little man like I am now, trying to be strong, but my lips were flipping around uncontrollably, and the tears were coming down. And the bailiff took us out, and we wound up. My mother never was the same after that. She didn't know us for about a year after that, but kept coming around. I ran away, because I knew my mother. Of course, the little ones, they never did really know our mother because they got put in a foster home. Well, that's where they grew up ever since Sheila was about 6 months old and Shirley's only about 2. So they were the parents that they really knew. And Doris and I got put in the same foster home. And that was a blessing. Though that hurt so bad, see, God's ways are not our ways. I never would have done that. But God would have it. We got put in a foster home where the people were from Texas, and they were old-fashioned. And Mr. Thompson, really the only father I really ever knew, he was born in 1898. And I was afraid to ask him for a long time, but he would always tell me, I grew up splitting rails, boy, like Lincoln, So one year, I got enough nerve to ask him because I didn't understand really what he meant, because only railroad ties, the only thing I split in rails was a railroad tie on the tracks. But one day I got enough nerve to ask him, Daddy, what do you mean by splitting logs, boy, like Lincoln? So then I understood. It's not just chopping wood, splitting rails is you get these big trees and you put a spike in it and you actually split them, But I learned a lot from him. That's where I got saved. That's how the Lord brought me closer to him through those hurting times. He was a carpenter. He built homes for a big contractor out in Redwood City, the new modern homes and all that. But when I got put in that foster home, me and my sister Doris, it was kind of an eye-opener because I saw stability in the home. There was a daddy, there was a mother. He went to work. He made sure I worked right alongside him, build a shed in the backyard or whatever it was, you know. And Mama, she made sure that we went to church and made sure we had 50 cents, put in a quarter, you know. It was a Sunday worshiping church. They were Baptists, and I've been Baptist all of my life. I went to Baptist BTU, Baptist Training Union, all that stuff, junior choir, all that, you know. But see, that's like partisan politics. When you got denominationalism, that keeps churches sometimes separated, and you can't get really united, you know. But I learned a lot from him, but he was short-fused, but I was a pretty good ducker. It was, you know, one time I was doing something, I cut my eyes open, he saw me, but through me cutting the eye, peripheral vision, I saw that cross-cut saw coming. Ducked. Another time I got caught rolling my eyes or cutting them. I was a pretty good ducker. I saw that claw hammer coming flying through the air. But the third time I didn't get out the way in time was the first time I ran away. And every day he would come home with scrap iron, that 56 Ford, just like Sanford and Son. I don't know if you guys ever seen Sanford. It's an old black program. But it was one of those kind of trucks, Ford trucks, you know, except his was blue. And he would come home, that thing would be loaded up with scrap iron, lead. Lead was illegal back then, you know, and all kinds of stuff. Come on out here and help me unload this truck, boy. So I was looking at Bonanza, and Bonanza was new. All this new color TV. You know, they had color TV, you know, and Bonanza was new. Come on out here and help me unload this truck, boy. And it was almost going off, the program. I got caught rolling my eyes. I went out there with an attitude, you know. And he saw it, and there was a water hose that was doubled over, about this long, doubled over. And I heard it coming, but I didn't get out the way in time. And it caught me right here. And I was so mad I ran. That was the first time I ran away. And I ran down to the creek. There was a creek not too far from where we lived. And I stewed and just pouted. And I ain't never going back. I ain't never, you know. But I did run away that time, and I went to where my mother used to live, but she wasn't living there anymore, because it was about, from East Oakland to West Oakland was probably about 10 miles. And so I went there, mother wasn't there, and so that was my first time sleeping outdoors. I found somebody's old pickup truck, and I crawled up in the back of that. So the next day I found my best friend, neighborhood best friend, before we got put in, I found him, and eventually I found out where my mother was living. And then when I finally got picked up, then they had me taken down to the police station where they put me on a lie detector test. In the old days, lie detector was in a wooden box with all the electronic stuff hooked up to it, because some colored kids had jumped on a white person downtown Oakland and beat him to death. So since I was around that area, you know, well, round them up. I was one that got rounded up. But God took me through that too. The lie detector, it set me free, so to speak. But God's working in all of this. He didn't let me go, you know. But so that's my first time running away, and my second time, and beyond, the other cause was for me running away was before that was my brother. My mother couldn't come see us without a court order, or none of my brothers and sisters and all that. You had to go to court and all that, you know. But my oldest brother, John, he came out to see me. At that time, he was about 14 or 15. And him and his buddies, and I knew some of them, old Jelly Boy, you know, nicknames. Everybody's got nicknames. Jelly Boy and Jukebox. They were on their bikes, and they had the bikes fixed up with the streamers and the flaps and all that, the reflectors, you know. And they came out there to see me and my sister, and we couldn't even go out. We couldn't even talk to them because my foster parents, they were new to the foster business, so they didn't want to break any of the rules. But that's one thing that also hurt me. You know, me and my sister, we were looking out the window. We could see them, but we couldn't talk to them or anything, you know. So I was 9, almost, so that was around June, and then September I had my 10th birthday. And so it was rough going in earthly terms. It was rough going, you know, but on godly terms, it was his way of bringing me to the Lord. So that was my first time running away, and they took me back there then, and the struggles went on. I kept learning from Daddy, but he was just too old-fashioned. I went out for the basketball team. I was junior high by then. I made the basketball team, and they made me quit because in the wintertime, it's dark at 5 o'clock, and you had to be in the house at dark. So you couldn't do anything. You know, I had plenty to eat, though. The hunger thing was over. Yeah, the hunger thing was over. I didn't know hunger after that unless later on in life I fasted when I was praying or something like that, you know. But the hunger, oh, man, I could eat many beans as I wanted and all that kind of stuff, you know. And that part of my life was over. The hunger was over. But they were just really strict. And then I ran away again when I got about 14 or 15. And the next foster home, but they were good people. They meant well. And I commend foster people. I commend them because it's not everybody that's going to take strange people into their home. Yes, some of them are abusive. Some of them are in it just for the money, the little stipping. But they weren't in it for that. They were in it because they wanted to try to help a little colored boy, a colored family that had got split up. And I think partly because her son, his name was Sonny Man, when I got put with them, he was already in Vacaville or somewhere doing hard time. And he didn't straighten up when he got out. You know, he would eventually go back to the corner. I'd see him standing on the corner, you know, with the other fellows just holding up the wall, you know, and drinking wine. And last thing I heard about him, somebody had put his eye out and he had a patch over his eye. But that's where I met the Lord. They were good people. I have to commend them because that's the only real father that I ever knew. The other foster homes, they were around, but they weren't interested in my development so much and my learning. You know, the second foster home I went to, I had freedom, but I didn't have any money. So then I started stealing again because I still wanted, the kids want stuff. You know, you're drawn. That's the carrot, you know, that's the draw. So I still wanted to go to the movies and stuff, you know, and stuff like that, and to the record hops, the dance. We call them record hops back then. You know, I wanted to go to that kind of stuff, and so I started stealing again. And before I started stealing, though, I had a paper route, Oakland Trib. And I had to beg those foster parents, the second ones, for the $35 deposit to get the paper route started. And they eventually gave in. And my first month of collection, going around knocking on doors like they did in those days, tell them I'm not here, you know, knocking on the door to collect collections. And I made $85. And that was more money than I ever had in my whole life. I felt like a man. You know, I felt like somebody. And I paid them their money back, and then they come, "That's all you made?" So they kept after me. So I just quit the paper route, and then that's when I started stealing again. And so I had freedom. I could go to record hops and all that. They didn't care about that kind of stuff. They didn't care about me going to church, although I still would go to church, the local community church. So down through the years, I would go to church, but when I got 14, 15, 16 in that second foster home, I was at all the record hops. I was doing the monkey and the twist, the mashed potatoes and all the dances, the swim and the James Brown and all of the other dances that everybody else was doing, but that's the thing about God. He won't turn his back on you because he's got a plan. Even though it's just like the prodigal son, I think it's Luke, the 10th chapter, where the story of the prodigal son, he was still my father. The Lord was still my father, just like in the prodigal son. He was still the prodigal son's father, no matter he went out and riotous living and wasteful and all that. Well, I did the same thing. But he was still my father, and he still cared about me. And he still maneuvered things unbeknownst to me to keep me to where I am. Eventually, I'm here today. And so I kept that stealing up till I got back to juvie. They put you in juvie then, First time I ran away, I didn't go to juvie. They put me in a place called Snedeker Cottage. And all the juvie was up on the hill, the Snedeker Cottage was up on the hill, the girls, all that was in the same area. So that was when I first sang my first talent show, when I was about 12 when my first time running away. On my first talent show, sang a song called The Duke of Earl by Gene Chandler. It's a real old one, but it's a goodie, And so that then after that, you go to juvie. And so you're up there at juvie with other kids that have shot I remember Fanning Wall, he had shot his father-in-law. He didn't put his hands on my mother. I'll kill the mother. Bleep, bleep, bleep. I'll kill him, But, and other people up there, you meet all kinds of people in juvie. All kinds. And most of them are not conducive to good behavior. So I went up there and waited for somebody to want me. And when you're about 15 or 16, really hard for foster people to want you because they know you're at a rebellious stage, and I was. And you might have been abused. You might have all kinds of problems. So again, I commend foster people for taking a chance with that because it takes a special kind of person to do that, And so I went on and on and on, and that foster home didn't work out. I wound up getting, I think I stayed up there 6.5 months that time, second time I ran away. So I was up there a long time. Some of the guys would get out and come back. Man, you still here? Yeah. And so, but being up there that long, I was able to, Mr. Johnson was the custodial guy, and would take the trash, come around with a trash truck. And so I was able to work with Mr. Johnson and a few other guys. And we would get to smoke. I would start smoking at about 15. It's just bad, And he would sneak us cigarettes and stuff like that. And we'd go, I called myself sweet on a girl of the girls. But we couldn't do anything. We'd just look at each other and wink and smile, But she was in the girls' home up there because she had got pregnant, In those days, that's what they did. I don't know if they do it now. But it was a relief to get out of the lockup. Because when I first got put up there, I tried playing crazy. That lasted about 2 weeks in isolation. I got sane right quick. So I waited up there 6.5 months, and then finally I got the next foster home, and it was a group foster home. But this is the foster home where I got in with my younger brother Jerome and the one that was next older than me, the one that used to take things, and they went before the rest of us. So it was about 6 guys in that foster home, and David was already a mechanic, and he used to build race cars and race out at Fremont Drag Strip when they used to be out there. He used to pro stock. He used to do it, but he was just a whiz. He wasn't too brainy, but he knew he knew cars, And I got in that foster home, and Mom James, that was all she did her whole life. And Pops, well, he was not around that much, you know. They'd have their little spats, and he'd go 2 blocks away. There was a little motel. He'd stay over there a few days until they got over being mad, and then he'd come back, you know. But that didn't last long because being boys, we used to like our room was upstairs above her area, and we'd be rumbling up there, wrestling and tussling and stuff like that. And she'd holler up there, stop that, you know, and we'd stop for a while, but we couldn't help it. We had to get back in it, you know. So eventually, I went back to juvie, and then the last foster home was with Merle and Benny, and they had goodness in their heart, you know, and so that's when I got put in the foster homes with my brothers. That was an eye opener for me, another eye opener, because the schools that I had gone to prior to that were all black. They were black schools in black neighborhoods. So that's all I knew. You know, might have had, I think Miss Berlin was one of my elementary school teachers, and she was one of the few white teachers, and it was very few Caucasians around. It was just black, and you had to stand up for yourself, you know, and it was an eye-opener when I got to Berkeley High, because it was a different scene altogether from the schools that I had gone to previously. Berkeley High, I saw, it was mostly Caucasian, but there were Asians there. There were a few blacks, and my brother David was going there. And it was sensational. It was a new sensation for me. And I couldn't, when I first tried to go there, I had to go to continuation high school in Berkeley because the scholastic rating for the Oakland school, Castlemont and Castlemont and McClymonds, they were so low that I had to go to continuation school and then transition back. And I did that. And one thing I forgot, let's see, no, it was a little later. It was, so I transferred back to Berkeley High and finished the 10th grade there and the 11th. And then I got out of foster homes when I was 17 because Merle, they were good people. I'm sorry for what I'm sorry. A teenager, you just might do anything. You're impulsive, you know. But Merle would make a keg of homebrew, and as long as that homebrew was there, she would, you know, her and some neighbors, you know. And so I told the probation officer that she would be drunk like that. And he didn't believe me until one day he came by and he knocked on the door, and Merle was coming out of the kitchen. She was a little sauced. And she said, "Tommy, who's at the door?" And I said, "Mr. Cronister," or whatever his name was. "Oh, my God," you know. And that's how I got out of foster homes. But those people loved me, and I loved them too. I'm so sorry I did that, you know, because those people they helped me even after I got out of foster homes. Because when I got out of foster homes, I went home to live with Mama, but that oldest brother of mine, John Wallace, was the king there. So I had a little ego and proud and all that too. So I had I could talk bad, you know, I could really talk bad. And so we had our arguments, and I got the best of them one time until my high school job, by the way, in Berkeley, I never did burgers or anything like that. It was McKinley was about 4 blocks from Sathergate, UC Berkeley main entrance. You know, so my high school job was shelving books up there at the main library. And so you had to learn the Dewey Decimal System and the Library of Congress system and stuff like that. And but I couldn't stay home. I stayed there maybe 8 months. But since I had that altercation with my oldest brother, one day when I came home from school, after my shelving books job, he opened the door and had a little .22 and stuck it right in my face and said, Negro. He didn't use the word Negro. He used the other N word. Don't you know I'll blow your brains out? And, well, thank you, Lord. See, he took care of me because all I could do then was try to look tough and back up. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you know. And so rather than retaliate, I moved out to my older brother, David, the one next older than me. He was already out of foster homes by then. So him and 2 or 3 other guys that had been in the same foster home near there, they had rented a place, and I joined them over there, and I paid my part of the rent. And I had old 52 Chevy by then. You know, back in those days, kids do wild things. You would give names to our cars. My car was named Al Capone, you know. And my brother Jerome's, he had another 52 Chevy with a V8 in it. Mine only had the slant 6. And his was like El Diablo, you know. But, you know, dropped in the front, you drop them on the ground, you could suicide knobs. You could do all that crazy stuff kids do, you know. And including driving without insurance and all. You know, you just do stupid things when you're young. You can't be told anything because you know everything. And that's what makes youth so dangerous. You're all intoxicated with youth. You know, you don't know nothing, but, you know, you're just at a dangerous stage. So I moved over there, and I couldn't stay there either because they were wilder than me. They would go out and pick up, hey, baby, you want to party? Homosexuals. Wasn't a bad word to use it back then, you know. Hey, baby, you want to party? And they get them over there and get them drunk and just jump on them and beat them just for nothing, you know, because they didn't like homosexuals. And runaway girls, go over to David Ford's house. One time I told this girl, she was a very good-looking girl, thin waist, big hips, nice in the face. I told her, can't you see what these guys want from you? You can't tell me, I'm grown. I said, okay, go ahead then. So I didn't stay there very long. As soon as I got enough money saved, and what the kicker was my place of sleeping was a couch. And there happened to be a big old rat about this big who had a pathway. That was his pathway, right on the bottom of that couch, right up on through some path he had made. And one night he was coming on up through it, and I was laying there, and he got on my feet on top of the covers. And when he got on my knees, the rat and the covers and everything else went. And I slept in my car that night, that old 52 Chevy, one of the best cars I ever had. But shortly there, and I waited for that thing the next day with my machete sitting in the kitchen, because he'd come out as long as it got a little quiet. I was sitting there, but he came on out, and I was just like a statue, but I didn't get him. I only got linoleum chips out of the floor because he went behind the refrigerator. I guess he was living up in the refrigerator because I couldn't see a hole or anything back there, you know. But after that, I really had to get out of there. So then I was able to get an apartment from Merle and Benny, my last foster home. They had a vacancy downstairs, and they rented it to me. And I was bad off for that 4-hour job. I could barely pay my rent and have anything left. So during that time, I was still down on the corner with the boys, you know, down on Market Street in the pool hall, all that. I was still down there. And that's another thing God delivered me from was from smoking, because I had started when I was 15. I was about 18 then. But I got delivered from that. How? In His way, He let me OD on something I didn't have any business fooling around with in the first place. So I was out 2 days. I think it was a Friday afternoon, not sunny day, and we, you know. And the guy in our group, we didn't call it gang. You know, it was our group. Guys had been in the same foster home and stuff like that. But it was kind of like a gang. But he was dealing pills and stuff, so we didn't have to pay for them. But James, he told me, he said, Thomas, you better take it easy on those things. Oh, I know what I'm doing. Yeah. Until I go boxing out there on the corner with one of my foster cousins, swung and missed, and that's all I remember until 2 days later. They had taken me to my apartment, and I came to. My mind was in focus, but my body was weak, as I don't know what. So God delivered me from, He took care of me. He didn't let me die during that time. And a bonus was, I was able to quit smoking cigarettes because I'd been trying to quit smoking cigarettes, but I couldn't do it. I could go, me and my brother Jerome both, we'd make a vow, we're going to quit. You know, we'd throw whole packs of Marlboros away. And then after about 2 days, when that chemical withdrawal starts coming down through your, it's a withdrawal. It's a hard withdrawal. It's itching in here, and you can't scratch it because it's itching inside. And we'd be out in front of my mother's house looking on the ground. Hey, Tommy, here's a good one. And we'd light that thing up. But see how he delivered me from smoking cigarettes. And he saved me from dying at the same time, you know. And so then I got hired at Cutter Laboratories, the place I wound up staying for 40 years and 7 months and retiring from there. And I was hired as a small animal caretaker, taking care of the guinea pigs, the rabbits, and the hamsters, the mice, and guess what else? Rats. I was still scared of them. They give you the mule skin and gloves. You're supposed, when the test was over, you're supposed to, and you can't keep rats like mice. You can put 50 or 100 of them and they just crawl under the shavies and stuff like that. Guinea pigs, put 8 or 10 of them in a cage, you know. Rats are different. You had to have them in a small cage about that size, about 6 by 6, because they would fight each other and kill each other. So we're supposed to use these mule skin and gloves, reach in there and grab them. Not me. I had to figure out some other way, so I get the garbage can open. That's how we dispense of them, you know, euthanize them. It was a garbage can. I'd shake them out, hitting the garbage can, and they would hold on, but eventually they came out. And then you get them all in there, and then you pour the chloroform in there, and put the lid on there. And you could hear them. They'd leap, boop, 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 hitting that can lid, you know. But that was my first job. But it paid, I think I got paid, a minimum wage was like $1.25 back then. And I got hired at Cutter Lab, and I was making like $2.87 an hour. Ooh, that was good money. And then I could afford to pay my rent and have a little left over and gas money for my old 57 Chevy. I think I had to sell my 52 Chevy to pay off traffic warrants. Young, didn't care about going to jail or time or a day or two. So I had to sell that right quick to keep my job. Didn't want to get stopped unexpectedly, you know. So I had a 52 Chevy by then, a 57 Chevy, pretty car, customized grill and everything, 3-speed stick. It wasn't a Hurst speed, it was a Fenton, but it still had a chrome handle, a chrome knob on it. Man, that thing, at 283, woo, it was really thrilling, you know. But God kept me through all that. So that was my first job at Cutter Lab. And then I got drafted in the Army, and that's another story. I'm going to leave it here. And the next leg, I'll get into my Army days when I got drafted. And then after that, what some of my jobs were. I worked at making vet vaccines, black leg for cattle, and Vibrio foetus, and and some other leptospiro for rabbits and different things like that, you know, large scale, commercial scale, you know. And I worked my way up. Over the years, I became we got this product developed for hemophilia and hemophilia A. That's for people who have bleeding disorder. And I was one of the scientists on the team there, and we got it. We took it through phase 2 and 3 clinical trials and got it licensed European Union and FDA. And it's a big seller. By then, it was Bayer Healthcare, because it was Cutter. When I started there, it merged with Miles Lab, became Miles Cutter, and then eventually in about 1985, Bayer Healthcare bought them. So I was one, and then it was a good seller. I became area supervisor, and all the shift supervisors reported to me, hired enough for 24/7 operation, and I stayed on that project from 89 to 2001. In 2001, I went to quality assurance. In 2 years, I made manager of that group, and I was able to get in 6 figures. That's why I was able, when my turn came to retire, they wanted to merge and make me manager over 2 groups and cross-train everybody and all. I didn't want to be bothered. I was almost 59 and a half. There you can retire and you can start drawing on your 401k without 10% penalty plus tax. So I was able to get into six figures my last 3 years, and my living style didn't change. I didn't, a lot of people, they get more money, they spend more. But I kept my same living style. I put a whole lot more in my 401k. So when they did this merger thing, I said, goodbye, 40 years, 7 months, that's enough anyway. So it was a long haul there, but it was beneficial to me. I worked swing shift a lot of years. It allowed me to go to school to get the classes I wanted over at San Francisco State. So God worked all this out. And eventually I got serious about my biblical stuff. The girl gave me a Bible before I got drafted. And that Bible stayed in the trunk where I left my stuff and my old I had a Shift 58 Bel Air then when I got drafted. I left that with my first foster parents, and they sold the car for me. And I left all my little clothes and the Bible, everything with them. So when I got out, I got all that. The car was sold, but I got the Bible back. And about 20 years ago, maybe 25, I pulled that Bible out and I started getting serious about my biblical studies. And now that Bible is all worn out, and I got a thing around it with all my notes and everything. And then I wore another one out, And I wound up in about 2001 or something like that, getting a master's degree in disciplinary Christian study. It was urban ministries from Aspen Theological Seminary, and that was the church that I was going to was it was a Baptist church, Sunday worshiper, and that man had pastored that church for 50 years and never took a salary, so I could follow a person like that, and. So I wound up getting that, and it wasn't in my mind to get it, but they had it there to offer. And it was accredited school, and the president back in Aspen Theological Seminary back in Aspen, Colorado, he would come once a year to see how things were going, and stuff like that. So it's been rough, but it was all for my benefit. And like I say, if I had my way, my choices in life would have been a completely different thing. And me and Doris going to the same foster home, we got that same Proverbs 22:6, I think it is. Train up a child in the way, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So I was trained. It got down in here. The seed was planted in me and in Doris. Because my other brothers and sisters that went to different foster homes, they never had that. They never exhibited that in their lives, But even when I was hanging out at the clubs and the bars, it was in my mind, sitting up there drinking beer or whatever, and somebody would strike up a conversation about the Lord, and that was my thing, But so things have worked out, and it took me a lot of years. I went to Seventh-day Sabbath day. That's the biblical Sabbath day. It doesn't say anything else about a holy day other than in Genesis, the 2nd chapter and the 3rd verse. I rested on the 7th day and I sanctified it. I set this day aside as a holy day. But I went to Sunday school one time, and that man put me out of there. Don't come over here with that stuff. And what I call myself really is a Seventh-day Baptist. Because there are Seventh-day Baptists. Most people never heard of them. You've heard of Southern Baptists and Northern Baptists and this and that and the other, but I'm like a Seventh-day Baptist. But there aren't any Seventh-day Baptist churches around. It's a well-known organization. They have their own annual convocation. They have their own publications and stuff like that. But when they first got started, they went to the main body of Baptists, the Sunday worshipers, but they weren't having any of it either. So they organized, and that's what we come about with Seventh-day Baptists. And they first came about in about 1640 or something, about 150 years before Seventh-day Adventists came along. So it's been around a very long time, But I don't knock Seventh-day Adventists. I don't get into the different doctrinal things, what happens to a person after death, and Ellen White and her thing, and the great disaster of people selling their homes and taking losses, when they tried to calculate when Jesus was coming back. I don't get stuck on that. When the man is up here preaching the word, I'm just looking for the truth. And Pastor Uli, he preaches the truth. You know, he's giving us encouraging words through the Holy Spirit that we might be helped, you know, in our walk with him. So I think I'm gone over my time now. So I'm going to close with that, just to say thank you for taking the time to listen. And God does work in mysterious ways. Some of the things that if I had it my way, I probably wouldn't have been here today. You know, all my brothers and sisters, they all died young, except for Doris and two other ones. The youngest one, I'm 18 years older than her, you know. But out of 11, there's only 4 of us left, and it's a hard thing. 1976, my brother Willie died. He was just 31. 6 months later, Jerome, my best friend, 9 months older than him, he got murdered in Oakland. And my first foster mother, she died in 76. That was a hard time. And it's hard to try to stand up and comfort your mother when her children are dead, laying there in a casket, you know. And you try to be strong for them, you know. And that hurts a mother. Words can't describe it, you know. So I'm going to close it. I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to my testimony of what the Lord has done to me. And he's got me here, and I don't care what anybody else says. I believe what Genesis 2 and 3 says. It was a declaration. It wasn't a command, but it was a declaration to the world, just like he made one woman and one man. That was a declaration. And when you have things to debate, you have to go back to the beginning. So thank you, everybody.